Most people think wars are fought with bullets, bombs, and tanks. But some of the most destructive wars in history were fought with printing presses, interest rates, and exchange rates. These are wars you never read about in high school history books. Wars where no armies march, but entire countries collapse. These are called currency wars. And once you start to notice them, you realize they shaped the rise and fall of empires just as much as any general on a battlefield. If you think this is only about economics, you're wrong. Currency wars decide who eats and who starves, who rules and who obeys. And yes, they are still happening today, quietly, invisibly, but touching every dollar in your wallet. The idea of a currency war is actually simple. Use money as a weapon. Sometimes that means deliberately devaluing your currency to make exports cheaper. Sometimes it means flooding markets with cheap credit to destabilize rival economies. Sometimes it means hoarding gold to tighten the pressure on everyone who needs it. On the surface, it sounds like clever strategy. In reality, it's the economic version of chemical warfare. You poison your enemy, but you poison yourself too. One of the first modern examples happened during the Great Depression. After the 1929 stock market crash, the global economy fell into chaos. Countries were desperate to sell their goods abroad just to survive. But global demand had collapsed, so they turned to competitive devaluation. Britain left the gold standard in 1931, and the pound collapsed. The United States followed in 1933, cutting the dollar loose from gold. France, Italy, Japan, everyone joined the race to cheapen their currency. The result? Trade didn't recover. Imports became more expensive. Living standards fell. And the tension helped pave the road to the Second World War. But currency wars didn't begin in the 1930s. The Roman Empire was fighting its own version nearly 2,000 years ago. Rome's power rested on trust in its silver coin, the denarius. As the empire expanded, wars became more expensive, and emperors found a tempting shortcut. They mixed silver with cheaper metals. At first, the change was small. A little less silver, a little more copper. Over time, the silver content fell from nearly 100% to less than 5%. It was the ancient world's version of a printing press. The result was predictable: inflation, loss of trust, economic collapse. Rome wasn't destroyed only by barbarians at the gates. It had already undermined itself from within. By the 20th century, the battlefield became even more complex. After World War II, the global financial system was rebuilt under Bretton Woods. The dollar was pegged to gold, and other currencies were pegged to the dollar. But this created a new power dynamic, because whoever controlled the dollar controlled the system. The United States could project power through money itself. Countries that stepped out of line faced financial pressure instead of military force. It was quieter, cleaner, and often more effective, but it came at a cost. By the late 1960s, the U.S. was printing more dollars than it could back with gold. The Vietnam War and massive domestic programs were expensive. Other countries noticed, and they began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. With Fort Knox under pressure, President Nixon made a shocking decision in 1971. He closed the gold window. Bretton Woods collapsed. Floating exchange rates began, and a new era of currency wars started. One of the harshest examples came in the 1980s, though few remember it that way. Japan was rising fast, exports were booming, and its trade surplus with the U.S. was massive. Washington was unhappy. In 1985, the Plaza Accord was signed. The U.S., Japan, Germany, France, and the UK agreed to deliberately weaken the dollar. Officially, it was about trade balance. In reality, it was a coordinated currency strike. The yen doubled in value within 2 years. Japanese exports became expensive, an asset bubble inflated, and then burst. The result? Lost decades. The U.S. didn't fire a single shot. It used the markets instead. The most dangerous thing about currency wars is this: they don't look like wars while they're happening. They look like interest rate decisions, policy debates, international summits. But the damage is real. Factories close, savings evaporate, unemployment surges. The 1997 Asian financial crisis made that painfully clear. Thailand's baht collapsed. The crisis spread. Millions were pushed into poverty almost overnight. Today, we're still living inside a currency war. Many economists call it Currency War 4.0. Central banks slash interest rates, print money, use sanctions to cut countries out of the financial system. The US and China are locked in a quiet power struggle. The dollar still dominates, but China pushes the yuan, stockpiles gold, and builds alternatives. Emerging economies are trapped. Lower rates and capital flees, raise rates and growth collapses. The 2020 pandemic accelerated everything. Trillions were printed. At first it seemed fine. Then the bill arrived. In 2022, inflation surged. The Federal Reserve raised rates, the dollar strengthened. And that pushed other countries toward crisis. A policy that stabilizes one nation can destabilize dozens of others. That's the hidden cost of currency wars. History tells us this clearly. They rarely end cleanly. A currency collapses, a new system emerges, or political instability forces change. Today, the same questions are being asked. Will the dollar last forever? Is a new system coming? Digital currencies? Something else entirely? These aren't abstract questions. They affect your savings, your job, your life. The most dangerous part? Most people don't even realize they're inside the war. You hear a bomb, but when a currency loses 20% of its value, you notice it at the grocery store. That's why financial education matters. If you understand the patterns, you can protect yourself. Because money is not neutral. It's a tool of strategy, and sometimes a weapon. The winners aren't always the hardest workers. They're the most powerful. And the losers are those who realize too late that they were part of the game. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the themes never change. And remember, if money is a weapon, the safest place to stand is where you're not the target. If this gave you a new perspective, don't forget to follow. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.